Have you ever finished something easy, a quick quiz, a short drive, or a simple task at work, and heard someone say, "Oh, that was a piece of cake?" You probably accepted the phrase without thinking twice. But when you stop to consider it, the expression is a little strange. What does dessert have to do with difficulty, or the lack of it? And honestly, when you say it out loud slowly, "That was a piece of cake," it starts to sound almost nonsensical. You're not eating anything. There's no bakery involved. No one is cutting slices or passing around plates. Yet somehow, across decades of English-speaking culture, we collectively decided that a slice of baked goods was the perfect metaphor for something requiring zero effort. It's odd. It genuinely doesn't make sense when you look at it head-on. And yet here we are, still saying it, still nodding when we hear it, still using it in job interviews, classrooms, and casual conversations without a moment's hesitation. If you've ever paused mid-sentence and thought, "Wait, why am I comparing this task to a dessert item?" You're not overthinking it. You're actually asking exactly the right question. Because buried inside this strange little saying is a surprisingly rich slice, pun absolutely intended, of cultural and linguistic history. And it goes deeper than you might expect. Let's explore, right here on the lost history of everyday things. If you enjoy this video, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. To understand piece of cake, we first need to appreciate how idioms work in general. Language isn't always logical. It doesn't evolve in neat, straight lines. Instead, it grows the way a city grows, organically, messily, with old structures sitting next to new ones. And nobody quite remembers why that road curves the way it does. Idioms are the alleyways of language. They exist because at some point, in some context, a group of people found a particular phrase vivid and useful, and it spread. Once an idiom spreads far enough, it stops needing to make literal sense. It just needs to be understood. And piece of cake is a perfect example of that process. The phrase appears to have originated in the United States sometime in the 1930s. The earliest known written record comes from a 1936 poem by Ogden Nash, the beloved American humorist known for his witty, light-hearted verse. In his poem Primrose Path, Nash wrote that life is a piece of cake. Now Nash wasn't using it as established slang, he was casually pulling from the cultural atmosphere, which suggests the phrase was already drifting through American vernacular before it ever made it onto the printed page. But why cake specifically? Why not a piece of bread? A glass of water? A nice, easy stroll? This is the part that genuinely puzzles language historians. And frankly, it puzzles me too. Of all the things you could choose to represent effortlessness, why land on a dessert?
One widely accepted theory points to a much older tradition, the cakewalk. In the American South during the 19th century, cakewalks were popular social events, often organized competitions where participants would walk or dance in elaborate patterns and styles around a floor. The most graceful or entertaining walker would win the prize. And the prize was, literally, a cake. The event itself wasn't strenuous. It was light, fun, social. Winning felt almost too easy. Over time, people began using cakewalk to describe anything that required minimal effort. It was a cakewalk, they'd say, meaning it was as simple and pleasant as strolling around a room for a slice of dessert.
From cakewalk, the linguistic leap to piece of cake isn't enormous. If walking for a cake was easy, then having a piece of cake, the reward itself, was even easier. You didn't even have to walk anymore. You were already there, fork in hand, no effort required. The phrase compressed the whole idea down to its most satisfying image. Pure, uncomplicated reward with none of the work attached. Still, it's worth pausing here and acknowledging how strange that journey is. We started with a dancing competition, moved through the concept of effortless victory, and landed on a 3-word phrase about eating dessert that now means easy. It isn't logical, it's accidental poetry. Evolving, impractical, and strangely perfect. During World War II, the phrase crossed the Atlantic and embedded itself firmly in British and Allied military slang. RAF pilots were particularly fond of it, using it to describe easy missions or simple flight conditions. There's a certain irony there, of course. Fighter pilots flying combat missions during one of history's most brutal conflicts, casually describing their work as a piece of cake. It was partly bravado, the kind of deliberate understatement that soldiers and pilots have used across every war to keep fear at arm's length. Calling something effortless when it absolutely wasn't was a way of projecting cool, steady confidence. Language as armor. This military adoption did something important. It gave the phrase credibility and spread, just as Roger traveled from radio operators to pilots to pop culture. Piece of cake traveled from American social events to British cockpits to newspapers, novels, and eventually into the mouths of everyone, everywhere, forever. By the 1950s and 1960s, it had thoroughly settled into everyday English. Teachers used it, coaches used it, parents used it to reassure nervous children before exams. And once television got hold of it, well, that was that. A phrase embedded in pop culture stops belonging to any one group. It just becomes part of the air. What's interesting, and admittedly a little funny, is how culturally specific the image of cake is. Cake, in Western culture, is associated with celebration, reward, and joy. Birthdays, weddings, graduations. Cake appears at the moments when life feels sweetest and most uncomplicated. So while the literal comparison doesn't hold up logically, the emotional logic is actually quite elegant. Saying something is a piece of cake doesn't just mean it's easy. It carries the faint warmth of celebration, of reward without struggle, of life at its most pleasant and undemanding. The word cake does emotional work that words like simple or effortless simply don't. And that, perhaps, is why it survived while other similar phrases faded away. Language users are instinctively drawn to words that carry feeling as well as meaning. Piece of cake feels good to say. It's soft and round in the mouth. It lands with a kind of cheerful finality. Try saying it after completing a difficult project, and notice how it almost makes you smile. That emotional resonance is no accident. There's also a mild element of humor baked into it, and yes, that pun was intended. When someone says, piece of cake with a slight grin, there's a wink embedded in the phrase. It's a tiny, playful acknowledgement that language is sometimes gloriously absurd, because we all know it doesn't make literal sense. And somehow that shared absurdity is part of the appeal. Compare it to other easy idioms, and you'll notice how the cake phrase holds up uniquely well. Its child's play works but feels slightly condescending. It's a walk in the park is pleasant, but almost too pleasant, too meandering. It's a breeze is nice but forgettable. Piece of cake has texture. It's specific enough to be vivid, strange enough to be memorable, and warm enough to feel like a small, genuine comfort. Of course, not everyone finds the phrase charming. Language purists occasionally object to idioms precisely because they resist literal interpretation and create confusion for non-native speakers. Imagine learning English as a second language, mastering grammar, memorizing vocabulary, and then hearing a native speaker describe their completed homework as a piece of cake. The confusion is real and, honestly, completely understandable. It is an odd saying. It doesn't make sense, not on the surface, not when you examine the mechanics. And yet fluency in any language means eventually making peace with its glorious illogic. That is, in many ways, the deeper lesson hiding inside this strange little phrase. Language is not a machine. It's not built for pure efficiency. It's built for human beings. Messy, emotional, imaginative, humor-loving human beings who apparently decided at some point that cake was the highest possible symbol of effortlessness and just ran with it. So next time you breeze through a task, nail a presentation, or finish an exam early and lean back with a quiet smile, go ahead and say it. Piece of cake. You'll be echoing Ogden Nash, channeling RAF pilots, carrying forward a century of cheerful, baffling linguistic history, and participating in one of the most delightfully irrational traditions the English language has ever produced. And honestly, that's kind of the magic of language. Sometimes the shortest phrases carry the longest, strangest, most wonderfully illogical stories.
Thank you for watching this episode. If you have thoughts or suggestions for upcoming videos, please share them in the comments section. thank you for being a part of this episode exploring the lost history of everyday things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep an eye out for future episodes exploring the history that mystifies us when we stop to think about it.